to Mr. Waxman, and then we will get another round. Dr. Fauci, next week this committee is going to be holding a hearing on the severe acute respiratory syndrome (SARS) epidemic. Can you give us an update on what we now know about SARS, including how it is transmitted, how far it has spread and what we can do to protect ourselves? Dr. Fauci: Certainly, Mr. Chairman. SARS, standing for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, has now spread through several countries, at least 17 countries. There are over 2,200 cases. There has now been 100 cases in the United States in 27 states. This is a new disease. It is what we refer to as an emerging microbe, an emerging infectious disease. The data from the CDC and from other laboratories indicate that the coronavirus, which is an interesting group, it is a very common virus. It is what causes about 10 to 20% of the common colds. There are two groups of coronaviruses. This is likely a member of a new third group. It has not been definitively demonstrated that this is the, or the only, cause of SARS, but the evidence is mounting every day from a variety of approaches that we are taking. It has the capability of being a very severe syndrome. The death rate in this is 3.5%, which may sound small, but when you think about the possibility of infecting hundreds of millions of people, this can turn out to be a major public health threat. In fact, in parts of the world it already is, leading to such draconian measures as quarantines and isolation in several countries. The CDC has done a magnificent job thus far, and we know that they will continue to. In not only identifying and tracking but essentially now moving ahead in collaboration with the NIH and a variety of other agencies, the FDA. In developing diagnostic therapeutics and on our way to a vaccine. So, in summary, Mr. Chairman, it is a serious threat. We must take it very seriously. We don't feel there is a need to panic at this point, but we must continue to do the very stringent public health measures that do for that. Let me yield to our ranking member, Mr. Waxman. Mr. Waxman: Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That was very interesting, what you had to say about this SARS. Our committee is going to hold a hearing on it next week. I think it is important for us to understand this very looming threat to the public and how best to deal with it. On this Bioshield proposal, the administration is suggesting that NIH conduct a research and development program for biological countermeasures. It then authorizes the procurement of countermeasures but only after determinations by the Secretary of HHS and Homeland Security and presidential approval. But, Dr. Fauci, who makes the decisions about the research and development phase? Dr. Fauci: We do, sir, and that is the point that I alluded to briefly in my opening remarks. There is the push and the pull. The NIH and other research agencies make a scientific decision about the kinds of research that we need to do. We rely heavily, as others do, on intelligence reports, particularly from the new Department of Homeland Security about the threat assessment. But the fundamental basic research, that is our decision, and the way we execute this research is a scientific decision. Mr. Waxman: You will be making decisions about research into countermeasures at the same time you oversee research against present threats to health. Dr. Fauci: Yes, sir, Mr. Waxman. Should Congress be worried that traditional medical research will slow down as NIH focuses on biodefense? Dr. Fauci: I don't believe so, Mr. Waxman. There is always a concern when you have to rev up and ratchet up your activities that there will be resources taken away from other areas. But if you look now thus far at the track record of the providing of resources for biodefense at the NIH, it has been quite extraordinary. We appreciate not only the administration but the Congress and the bipartisan support of that. But if you look at the other areas of the naturally emerging and re-emerging diseases, that has not suffered and in fact has grown at a rate commensurate with the rather substantial growth of the rest of the NIH. So, in fact, we have not seen that. Mr. Waxman, is there a potential for dual use where the research of biodefense may well lead us to research breakthroughs for other diseases? Dr. Fauci. I think it is not only a potential, Mr. Waxman. I think it is inevitable that there will be an important contribution to the research that we put into emerging and re-emerging diseases to inform us about biodefense research. And it is without a doubt that the research that goes into biodefense will help us with naturally occurring. Because as a matter of fact, as we have discussed before, as you know, we feel that deliberately released microbes is just another form of emerging and re-emerging disease. Instead of occurring naturally, it is done with malice and deliberately, but the end result can be the same. In some respects, nature itself can be our worst bioterrorist. So the resources and the manpower and the expertise that goes into one will naturally flow seamlessly back and forth into the other. Mr. Waxman, let me ask you about antibiotic resistance. This certainly poses a threat to public health now and a potential bioterrorist threat for the future. Yet drug companies have few antibiotics in development, and some people believe there is a market failure for drugs to treat resistant bacteria. How urgent is the crisis in antibiotic resistance, and does it make sense for Bioshield to cover research into new antibiotics to treat resistant bacteria? Dr. Fauci. The answer to your question is it is a serious threat, and it has been a threat for some time. I think you alluded to, in your opening statement, the fact that, as months go by, we are pushing the envelope further and further about the emergence of resistance to microbes for which we have maybe one last firewall of an antibiotic against that. We are recognizing this at the research level, and we are putting more resources into it. But I believe, and we all believe, that the basic research that we will be doing on microbes for biodefense will directly and indirectly address the concerns that you have and the concerns that we have. For example, as part of our biodefense research endeavor, we are involved in a major program for the sequencing of pathogenic microbes, not only those on the category A or B list, but microbes for which one can, by a simple mutation, lead to a microbe that would be a bioterrorist.